He laughed when I warned him. Actually laughed. Like I'd just told the world's funniest joke. His smirk hung in the air between us, dripping with the kind of arrogance only a man with a $63 million contract could afford. By sunrise, that contract would be nothing but digital ash, and his empire would crumble faster than sugar in rain. And me, I'd be home, sipping my morning coffee while his phone exploded with panicked calls he'd never be able to answer. Sometimes the sweetest revenge tastes exactly like dark roast at 6:15 a.m. My name is Julia Monroe, and until 10:45 a.m. on that Tuesday morning, I believed my work spoke for itself. 2 years of building Brightensys analytics from a startup hemorrhaging money into a company landing 8-figure contracts should have meant something. The proprietary data system I designed, every algorithm, every line of code written during countless nights fueled by cold coffee and sheer determination, had become the backbone of our success. But as I sat in conference room A, watching Brandon Kessler's mouth move in slow motion, I learned that in corporate America, your value expires the moment someone cheaper walks through the door. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Brandon's voice cut through the hushed anticipation of 20 executives from Aurelius International, our biggest potential client yet. His designer suit caught the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Langston. Before we proceed with finalizing our partnership, I need to address a personnel change. My fingers tightened around my tablet. Personnel change. This was supposed to be the contract signing, the culmination of 6 months of negotiations I'd personally shepherded. My algorithms had impressed their tech team. My presentations had won over their board. We've decided to give Julia Monroe some well-deserved time off. Brandon's smile was practiced, corporate, the kind that never reached his eyes. After her tremendous contributions, she needs rest, effective immediately. The words hit me like ice water. Around the conference table, confused glances darted between the Aurelius team and me. Someone cleared their throat. A pen clicked nervously. My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. 2 years of 80-hour weeks, of missing birthdays and canceling vacations, reduced to needs rest. Haley Chen here. Brandon gestured to the 20-something blonde who'd been shadowing me for 3 months. We'll be taking over Julia's responsibilities. She's shown remarkable aptitude. Remarkable aptitude. The same woman who'd asked me just last week how to run a basic SQL query, who'd confused correlation with causation in front of our engineering team, who'd been hired. I suddenly understood with crystalline clarity, not for her skills, but for her willingness to accept half my salary. My legs moved on autopilot as security. When had security been called, escorted me from the room. The Aurelius executives avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by their portfolios. Only one, a silver-haired woman named Margaret, whom I'd worked closely with, met my gaze. Her slight nod felt like a lifeline in a room full of sharks. The walk to HR felt endless. My heels clicked against marble floors I'd helped pay for with systems that increased revenue by 300%. Employees scattered from my path, word already spreading through the digital arteries of office gossip. By the time I reached the frosted glass doors of human resources, my entire career had been reduced to a cardboard box and a non-disclosure agreement. 2 months severance. The HR director, a nervous man named Paul, pushed papers across his desk. Healthcare continues for 90 days. You'll need to return your keycard, laptop, and complete all knowledge transfer within 72 hours. Knowledge transfer? I almost laughed. How do you transfer 2 years of intellectual property developed on personal time, on personal equipment, because the company had been too cash-strapped in the beginning to provide resources? How do you hand over the architecture of a system so complex that even my documentation required documentation? Julia, Paul's voice softened, a crack in the corporate facade. For what it's worth, I think this is... Don't, I signed where indicated, each signature feeling like signing away pieces of myself. Just don't? The box waited on a side table. Someone had already packed my things, the orchid I'd nursed back to health after finding it half dead in the break room, my collection of data visualization books, the coffee mug that read, World's Okayest Data Scientist, a Secret Santa gift from the team I'd built and trained. Even my personal notebook, filled with ideas and algorithms, had been tucked inside. How thoughtful. As I stood to leave, Paul's computer chimed. An email notification flashed across his screen. I caught a glimpse before he minimized it. Something about finalizing the Aurelius contract, scheduled for Friday. $63 million. The number burned itself into my memory. 3 days to transition everything, I asked, testing. Brandon wants a smooth handover, you understand. I understood perfectly. They needed me functional just long enough to transfer my knowledge to Haley, to ensure the Aurelius contract went through without a hitch. Then I'd be discarded. Another casualty of corporate efficiency. Of course, I said, hefting the box. I'll make sure everything is properly documented. Paul relaxed visibly, missing the emphasis on properly. He'd probably never read my original employment contract, particularly Clause 9.7, but I had. The next morning arrived with a performance I'd rehearsed during a sleepless night. Professional Julia, gracious Julia, the Julia who wouldn't make waves as she drowned. I arrived at Brightonsis at 8:30 a.m. sharp, wearing my best suit armor for the battlefield of corporate theater. Julia. Oh my God, I'm so sorry about yesterday. Haley intercepted me at the elevator, her concern as authentic as her spray tan. Brandon says you're burned out. You should have told someone. I studied her face, searching for any hint of awareness, any glimmer that she understood her role in this corporate sacrifice. Nothing. Just wide eyes and lip gloss, clutching an iPad covered in motivational stickers. These things happen, I said, stepping into the elevator. I'm here to make sure you have everything you need. Her relief was palpable. You're amazing. Seriously, most people would be, so bitter. Most people hadn't spent the previous night photographing every personal file, every timestamp, every proof of creation that predated their official employment. Most people hadn't discovered their entire life's work existed in a legal gray area that they were about to paint black and white. The transition room, a sterile conference space usually reserved for client presentations, had been set up with 2 workstations. My old laptop sat beside a new one, already logged into Haley's account. Someone had printed Knowledge Transfer Protocol and taped it to the wall, as if giving exploitation a formal name made it acceptable. So, Haley settled in beside me, notebook ready. Brandon says the Aurelius system is super complex, but that you can explain it simply. He says you're, really good at that. Brandon says a lot of things. I opened the first program, watching her frantically scribble notes. Let's start with the basic architecture. For 3 hours, I walked her through the surface layer, database connections, user interfaces, the shiny parts that looked impressive in demonstrations, but meant nothing without the underlying engine. She nodded along, occasionally asking questions that revealed just how vast the gulf between us truly was. This is incredible, she gushed during our lunch break. You built all this yourself. Every line. Wow. And now it's going to close the biggest deal in company history. Brandon says the commission structure alone will set up everyone for years. I paused, sandwich halfway to my mouth. Commission structure. Oh, her face flushed. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. It's just, Brandon mentioned at the leadership meeting that key personnel would receive bonuses based on the Aurelius contract value, like significant bonuses. Key personnel. The knife twisted deeper. That afternoon, Brandon himself made an appearance. He swept in around 2:15 p.m., all performative concern and false camaraderie. Julia, how's the transition going? Smoothly. I minimized a window before he could see what I was actually documenting. Haley's very enthusiastic. That's what we love about her. Fresh perspective. He perched on the desk edge, a power move meant to tower over me. Listen, I want you to know this isn't personal. It's just business. The board wants younger, hungrier energy. Of course. And I hope there won't be any complications. You know how messy things can get when people feel emotional about departures. His smile had edges now. We've been more than generous with the severance package. 2 months' salary for 2 years of building his empire. Generous indeed. I'm not emotional, I said evenly. I'm professional. Good. He stood, adjusting his cufflinks. Make sure Haley has everything by Friday morning. The Aurelius team will be here at 9 for the final presentation. After he left, trailing cologne and condescension. Haley touched my shoulder. He can be intense, but he means well. He talks about you all the time. You know, says you're the smartest person he's ever hired. Just not smart enough to keep... The words slipped out before I could stop them. Haley's face cycled through confusion, discomfort, and finally, a kind of willful blindness. You'll find something better, she said with the conviction of someone who'd never been discarded. Brandon even said he'd write you a recommendation. That evening, as 5:45 p.m. approached, I made my final rounds. The development team avoided eye contact. The junior analysts whispered in corners. Only Marcus, the security guard who'd walked me out yesterday, offered anything real. Shame what they're doing, he said quietly as I passed his desk. Real shame. In the parking garage, I found my car surrounded by others, all newer, all shinier. Through the executive floor windows, I could see Brandon's office, lights blazing. Was he practicing his presentation for Friday? Calculating his bonus? My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Haley had already updated her title to Senior Data Architect at Brighton Sys Analytics. The announcement had 47 likes and counting. Comments poured in. Congrats. Well deserved. Rising star. I sat in my car for a long moment, engine idling. 3 days ago, I'd been indispensable. Now I was a ghost haunting my own creation, teaching my replacement how to wear my skin. But ghosts, I reminded myself, have one advantage. They know all the secrets the living try to bury. My apartment had never felt more like a sanctuary than when I closed the door that evening. I poured a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving for a celebration, and spread 24 months of paperwork across my dining table. Somewhere in these documents lay my ammunition. The original employment contract sat in a manila folder, creased from the day I'd signed it in Brandon's office, back when Brighton Sys was just 6 people in a dream. I'd been employee number 4, brought in when they couldn't afford market-rate talent. We'll make it worth your while, Brandon had promised. Stock options, profit sharing, the works. Those promises had evaporated like morning mist. Revised away in subsequent contracts, I'd been too busy building the company to scrutinize, but the original remained. And more importantly, so did Clause 9.7. I read it again, each word a small revelation. In the event of termination, any intellectual property created by the employee that has not been formally transferred to the company through written documentation signed by both parties shall remain the sole property of the employee. This includes but is not limited to algorithms, code repositories, system architectures, and proprietary methodologies. My laptop, my personal laptop, not the company-issued one I'd returned, contained everything, every iteration, every breakthrough, every late-night epiphany that had transformed Brighton Sys from a struggling startup to a $63 million powerhouse. The commit history showed timestamps 11:30 p.m., 2:15 a.m., 4:47 a.m., all outside work hours, all on personal equipment. The wine tasted sweeter with each file I reviewed. Email threads where Brandon explicitly approved my working from home, on whatever device is convenient. Messages thanking me for going above and beyond by developing solutions on weekends. And nowhere I searched methodically, nowhere was there a single transfer document bearing my signature. My phone rang at 9:20 p.m., an unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Julia Margaret from Aurelius. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. I wanted to check in. Today's meeting was unexpected. I chose my words carefully. Changes happen. I'm sure Brighton Sys will continue to serve your needs. A pause. That's what concerns me. The preliminary system review is scheduled for Friday. As you know, your algorithm suite is the cornerstone of our decision. This Haley, can she truly manage something so complex? I'm providing comprehensive documentation, I said, which wasn't technically a lie. Julia, her voice dropped. I've been in this business 30 years. I know when someone's being pushed out, and I know when it's going to bite a company in the ass. If there's something I should know before we sign. The opportunity dangled before me like a rope to a drowning woman. One word about the intellectual property issue and the deal would evaporate. But that would be petty, obvious, traceable back to a disgruntled former employee. Brighton Sys values its client relationships above all else. I said instead. I'm certain they'll deliver what they've promised. Another pause. I see. Well, if circumstances change, Aurelius is always looking for exceptional talent. After we hung up, I opened my personal Git repository. There it was, 2 years of innovation. Meticulously documented, indisputably mine. The beauty of modern development, every piece of code carried its DNA, timestamps that predated any company claim. I pulled up the copyright registration website. The process was simpler than most people realized. Upload documentation, provide development history, pay the fee, submit. At 11:58 p.m., I clicked the final button. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Copyright registration received. Expedited processing selected. 72 hours. By Friday morning, every algorithm Brandon planned to showcase, every system Haley thought she understood, every piece of intellectual property worth $63 million would be legally, irrevocably mine. I poured another glass of wine and opened my employment law textbook, a gift from my sister when I'd started at Brighton Sis. Just in case, she'd said. Smart woman. The chapter on intellectual property disputes was thoroughly bookmarked. Precedent after precedent supported the creator's rights when proper documentation existed. Companies that failed to secure transfers faced injunctions, lawsuits, and most devastatingly, the immediate halt of any business conducted using disputed property. My phone buzzed. A text from Haley. Thank you so much for today. I think I'm getting it. Can't wait to show Brandon I can handle this. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But she'd learn what every woman in tech eventually discovered when you build your career on someone else's graveyard. You better make sure the bodies are actually dead. The wine bottle sat empty now, but I felt more sober than I had in years. They wanted my knowledge, my creation, my life's work, but they didn't want me. They assumed I'd slink away quietly, grateful for their table scraps, too beaten down to fight back. Brandon had laughed when I'd warned him about replacing me too hastily. Don't be dramatic. Julia, you're not irreplaceable. He was right. I wasn't irreplaceable. I was indispensable. And in less than 48 hours, he'd understand the difference. Thursday arrived wrapped in Pacific Northwest drizzle, the kind that made everything feel muted and gray. I dressed with particular care, not the power suit of yesterday, but something softer, approachable, unthreatening, the kind of outfit that whispered team player while concealing the knife. My lawyer technically. My sister's roommate from law school. But Brandon didn't need to know that, had confirmed everything via encrypted email at 6:23 a.m. The copyright filing was processing. The employment contract was airtight. The trap was set. Morning, Julia. Haley bounced toward me in the lobby, wielding 2 cups of coffee like peace offerings. I got your usual. Well, what Brandon said was your usual oat milk latte. That's very thoughtful. I accepted the cup, noting she'd even remembered the extra shot. Brandon had good intelligence on his employees. He just never bothered to understand what truly mattered to them. The transition room felt smaller on day 2. Haley had plastered the walls with printout system diagrams I'd drawn, flowcharts she'd copied, authentication protocols highlighted in 3 different colors. It looked like the bedroom of an obsessive fan, which, in a way, it was. I studied everything last night, she announced proudly. I think I understand the basic architecture now. Show me. For 20 minutes, she walked through her understanding. It was surface level. Wikipedia deep. The kind of knowledge that impressed executives who didn't know better. She could navigate the interface, run preset queries, generate reports from templates I'd built. She was, essentially, a very enthusiastic user manual. Great progress, I lied smoothly. Now let's talk about the Aurelius customization modules. Her face fell slightly. The what? The proprietary algorithms that make their data integration possible. The ones they're specifically paying for. Oh, right, those. She flipped through her notes frantically. I don't think we covered those yesterday. We didn't. I pulled up a screen filled with code that might as well have been hieroglyphics to her. This is the heart of the system. Without understanding this, you're just playing with an expensive calculator. The blood drained from her face as I walked her through mathematical concepts that had taken me 6 months to perfect. Machine learning models, predictive analytics, real-time data transformation protocols. Her notes became increasingly frantic. questions more desperate. Maybe we should call in the dev team, she suggested around 11 a.m. They don't understand it. I built this independently. Remember, Brandon wanted to keep it compartmentalized for security. But then how am I supposed to? You'll manage. I patted her shoulder with calculated condescension. Brandon believes in you. Fresh perspective. Remember. Lunch was a careful orchestration. I ate alone in the cafeteria. Visible but isolated. While the rumor mill churned, conversations hushed when I passed. Some colleagues offered sympathetic smiles. Others, those who sensed which way the wind was blowing, had already begun treating me like a ghost. At 1:47 p.m., an email popped up in my personal account. The Copyright Office, expedited registration complete, certificate attached. I allowed myself 30 seconds of pure, vindictive joy, then back to the performance. Haley, I called out, voice carefully modulated. I've been thinking, you should have backup documentation. Let me create a special folder with everything you'll need for tomorrow. Oh my God. Yes, thank you. Relief flooded her features. I was starting to worry, not worry, just, I know. I spent the next 2 hours creating the most comprehensive documentation package Brighton Sys had ever seen. Detailed guides for every function. Step-by-step procedures for basic operations. Flowcharts that looked impressive but led nowhere important. Everything needed to run the system except the system itself. At 4:30 p.m., Brandon made his second appearance, this time with the CFO and head of sales in tow, a power display for my benefit, or perhaps for Haley's. How's our transition, superstar? He clapped Haley's shoulder while she beamed. Ready for the big leagues. Absolutely, Julia's been amazing, so thorough. That's what we like to hear. His eyes found mine. And Julia, everything documented, no surprises. Everything's documented, I confirmed. Every line of code, every algorithm, every timestamp that proved it was mine. Excellent. The Aurelius team confirmed 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. We'll do the presentation in the main conference room. He turned to Haley. You'll be running the live demonstration. Think you can handle it? Of course. The men exchanged satisfied looks and filed out, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and unchecked privilege. Haley stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Julia. The live demonstration, I don't actually know how to initialize the core modules. It's in the documentation. But which document? There are 47 files here. I glanced at my watch. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You have all night. You're leaving, but it's only 5:15. My access expires at 6. Security protocol. I gathered my things with deliberate calm. Besides, you need to learn to stand on your own feet. That's what Brandon wants, isn't it? But you'll be fine. I shouldered my bag, noting how her hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. Just remember when you present tomorrow, you're not just representing yourself. You're representing everything Brighton Sys claims to be. The walk to the elevator felt endless and too quick simultaneously. Each step carried me further from 2 years of my life and closer to what came next. In my bag, a single USB drive contained everything: the real code, the actual documentation, the proof that would reduce Brandon's empire to rubble. The security guard, Marcus, nodded as I passed. Take care, Ms. Monroe. You too, Marcus. You might want to update your resume. He frowned, but I was already through the doors, out into the Seattle drizzle that felt like a baptism. In 12 hours, Brandon would stand before Aurelius International with a system he didn't own, operated by someone who didn't understand it, selling a lie built on the assumption that I'd simply disappear. He'd laughed at my warning. By tomorrow morning, he'd understand that some jokes write their own punchlines. My final day at Brighton Sys began at 7 a.m. sharp. I arrived before the early birds, while the office still held that peculiar pre-dawn quiet that made every footstep echo. Security had deactivated my keycard. Of course they had, but Marcus was working the desk. Thought your access ended yesterday, he said, not unkindly. It did, but Haley asked me to come in early. She's having some technical difficulties. I held up a visitor's badge I'd requested the previous afternoon. Just here to help with the transition. You know how it is. He studied me for a long moment, then buzzed me through. Lot of folks upstairs already. Big day. Indeed it was. The executive floor hummed with nervous energy. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, I could see the preparation catered breakfast, fresh flowers, screens displaying the Brighton Sis logo, $63 million worth of corporate theater, waiting for its star performer. I found Haley in the transition room, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and the debris of an all-night panic session. Her designer outfit from yesterday had been replaced with wrinkled clothes that suggested she'd never left. "Thank God," she breathed. When she saw me, "Julia, I can't get the authentication protocols to sync with the main server. I've tried everything in the documentation." "Show me." Her laptop screen displayed error after error. She'd been trying to initialize the system using the surface-level credentials, not understanding that the real authentication lived 3 layers deeper. In code she couldn't even read, let alone modify. "Here," I leaned over, typing slowly enough for her to follow. "You need to access the subsidiary authentication first." "But that's not in the The system flickered to life, displaying the main interface. "How did you—" "Experience," I straightened. "The Aurelius team will be here in 90 minutes. Can you run the demonstration now?" She pulled up the demo script, fingers flying across the keyboard with newfound confidence. Data populated the screens, charts rendered beautifully. The system sang its siren song of efficiency and innovation. "Perfect," Brandon's voice boomed from the doorway. He looked immaculate, primed for victory. "I knew you had it in you. Haley, natural talent." Julia helped. "Team effort, that's what we're all about." He barely glanced my way. "Julia, thanks for stopping by, but we've got it from here. Big day. Need to focus." "Of course." I gathered my things one final time. "Actually, Brandon, could I speak with you privately, just for a moment?" His jaw tightened. But the witnesses, Haley, 2 passing executives, made refusal awkward. 2 minutes. His office hadn't changed. Same pretentious awards on the walls. Same photo of him shaking hands with minor tech celebrities. Same arrogance hanging in the air like too much aftershave. "What is it? Julia, make it quick." "I wanted to give you one last chance." I stood by his desk, noting the printed Aurelius contract waiting for signatures. "Call off the demonstration, postpone the signing, work out a proper transition." He laughed, that same dismissive sound from the conference room 3 days ago. "Are you seriously threatening me? Now do you have any idea what today means?" "I know exactly what it means. 63 million. Your bonus is what, 1.2 million. His face went still. "How did you— You sent an email to the wrong Julia. Easy mistake. There are 2 of us in the directory." I pulled out my phone, showing him the screenshot. "But that's not the issue. The issue is clause 9.7. "What clause?" "The one about intellectual property rights. The one that says if you haven't formally transferred ownership, the creator retains all rights." I set a single sheet of paper on his desk. "My copyright certificate, filed yesterday, officially recognized as of this morning." He snatched the paper, eyes scanning rapidly. The color drained from his face in real time. "This is bullshit. You developed that system on company time." "Personal time, personal equipment. Check the commit logs. Check the emails where you approved it. Check the complete absence of any transfer documentation with my signature." "You can't do this." His voice had lost its commanding tone. "The demonstration is in an hour. 53 minutes, actually." I moved toward the door. "You have 2 choices. Brandon, cancel the demonstration and negotiate with me properly, or proceed with stolen property and face the consequences." "This is extortion." "No, this is intellectual property law. You'd know that if you'd ever bothered to read the contracts you make people sign." I paused at the door, looking back at the man who'd discarded me like obsolete software. "You laughed when I warned you about replacing me too quickly. Are you laughing now?" His response was to grab his phone, probably to call legal. I left him to it. The elevator ride down felt like descending from Olympus. In the lobby, the Aurelius team was arriving, 12 executives in identical black town cars. Margaret among them. She caught my eye through the glass doors, a question in her expression. I smiled and kept walking. Outside, the Seattle morning had broken clear and bright. One of those rare days when Mount Rainier seemed close enough to touch. I sat in my car and pulled out my laptop, with my code, my creation. At 8:45 a.m., I opened my email and began typing. Dear Mr. Kessler, Board of Directors, and Legal Team. By the time I hit send at 8:58 a.m., attaching the copyright certificate and a formal cease and desist, the Aurelius team would be settling into their chairs, ready for a show that could no longer legally proceed. My phone exploded with calls before I'd even started the engine. Brandon, legal, HR, even Haley, her number popping up with increasing frequency. I let them all go to voicemail and drove to my favorite coffee shop, the one with the good espresso and the view of the sound. The barista, who knew my order by heart, raised an eyebrow at my presence on a weekday morning. Playing hooky? She asked. Something like that. I accepted my cortado with steady hands. Actually, I'm conducting a practical lesson in valuing your assets before you lose them. Through the window, I watched the city wake up. All those office buildings full of people like I'd been grinding themselves to dust for companies that saw them as replaceable parts. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret at 9:22 a.m. Quite the morning at Brighton, sis. I believe you mentioned being available for new opportunities. I smiled into my coffee. Brandon had bet his career on a contract built on stolen foundations. By sunrise tomorrow, he'd understand that the house always wins when the house remembers to secure the deed. The coffee shop's Wi-Fi worked perfectly for monitoring the carnage. By 9:35 a.m., my formal cease and desist had reached every relevant inbox at Brighton Sis. By 9:41 a.m., the first panicked response arrived from their chief legal officer. Ms. Monroe, there seems to be a misunderstanding. We need to discuss this immediately. Please call. Delete. At 9:57 a.m., Haley's texts turned desperate. Julia, please, the demo crashed and Brandon is screaming at legal, and the Aurelius people are just sitting there. What do I do? I sipped my second cortado. Outside, a seagull fought the wind, working twice as hard to go half as far. I knew the feeling. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Brandon's direct line. This time, I answered. Julia. His voice had lost all pretense of corporate polish. You need to stop this. Now. I've already stopped it. Check your email. I'm standing in front of 20 Aurelius executives who flew in specifically for this demonstration. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I'm protecting my intellectual property. You should understand. It's just business. We can work this out. Come back to the office. We'll discuss terms. My terms were sent with the cease and desist, full recognition of ownership, licensing fee of 30% of any revenue generated by my systems, retroactive compensation for unauthorized use. 30%? He was practically shrieking. That's insane. Industry standard for proprietary technology. Ask your legal team. Oh wait, they're probably busy explaining to Aurelius why you tried to sell them stolen property. A muffled conversation in the background. Raised voices. Then Brandon again. Controlled but cracking. What if we bring you back full reinstatement? Salary increase? The promotion to VP you wanted? I never wanted VP. I watched the barista craft a perfect rosetta in someone's latte. I wanted to build something meaningful. I did that. Then you threw me away. That was a mistake. I see that now. You see $63 million evaporating. That's not the same as seeing me. Please. The word sounded physically painful for him to say. The Aurelius team is walking out. Margaret Steinberg just told me they can't proceed without clear ownership. We'll lose everything. You'll lose everything. I've already lost my job. Remember, I'm just protecting what's mine. This is revenge. No, Brandon, revenge would be telling Margaret about your email discussing personal bonuses before employee severance packages. Revenge would be forwarding your messages about trimming the fat to start the new fiscal year. This is just contract law. Silence. Then, quieter. What do you really want? I closed my laptop, done watching the digital world burn. I wanted to build something incredible. I did. I wanted to be valued for my contributions. I wasn't. Now I want you to remember this moment every time you consider treating talent like a disposable resource. The board will sue. They'll lose. My lawyer says the case law is clear. Besides, do you really want this playing out in court? Discovery would be fascinating. All those emails about maximizing profits by replacing senior employees with cheaper alternatives. Another pause. Longer. I could hear the conference room emptying in the background, expensive heels clicking on marble, the death rattle of a deal. "You've destroyed us," he said finally. "No. I gave you every opportunity to handle this properly. You chose exploitation over ethics. You chose a prettier face and a cheaper salary over proven expertise. You made your bed with Excel sheets instead of understanding. Haley can't run the system." "I know. We'll have to cancel client deliverables, the Samsung project, the Microsoft expansion." "I know. People will lose their jobs, good people, not just me." For the first time, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Not for him, but for the collateral damage. "Then maybe," I said carefully, "you should have thought about that before you walked me out in front of our biggest client, before you humiliated me for sport, before you assumed I'd simply disappear. I'll authorize the 30%. We'll sign today. Read the full terms first, including the clause about public recognition of creator rights, and the retroactive payments, and my approval requirement for any modifications to the core system. That gives you effective control over our entire operation." "Yes, it does." I signaled the barista for my check. "You have until 5 p.m. to respond. After that, I'll be entertaining other offers." Margaret seemed very interested in talking. "You wouldn't—" "Watch me." I hung up and blocked his number. The texts continued flooding in from other numbers, but I silenced them all. At 11:11 a.m., a news alert popped up on my phone. Brightensys Analytics stock plummets following failed Aurelius demonstration. At 11:43 a.m., an email from Margaret Steinberg. "I believe we should discuss your innovative approach to data architecture. Aurelius values creators who understand their worth." At 12:15 p.m., my lawyer texted, "They're caving. Full terms. They want to sign by 3. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I ordered lunch at the cafe, ate slowly while watching the ferry cross the Sound. The city looked different from this angle. All those glass towers full of people scrambling, dealing, discarding each other like playing cards. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Julia, this is Paul from HR. Brandon has been placed on administrative leave pending board review. The company would like to discuss your immediate reinstatement with full recognition of your contributions. Please call." I archived it without responding. They still didn't understand. This was never about getting my job back. It was about teaching them that some things, talent, innovation, the people who build your empire aren't disposable. It was about making them remember that when you laugh at someone's warning, you better be certain they don't hold the keys to your kingdom. Most of all, it was about that moment when Brandon's laughter died in his throat, when he realized that the very thing he'd discarded so carelessly was the only thing keeping his house of cards standing. I paid for my lunch and left a generous tip. 3 o'clock would come soon enough. The papers would be signed, the percentages calculated, the recognition formally documented. But right now, in this perfect Seattle afternoon, I had nowhere urgent to be and nothing to prove. For the first time in 2 years, I was free. And somewhere across the city, in a conference room with 63 million reasons to panic, Brandon Kessler was finally learning the difference between laughing at someone and having the last laugh. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine and a sense of unreality. I'd spent Friday afternoon in a law office, watching Brightensys executives sign away 30% of their future revenue with the defeated air of generals surrendering territory. The retroactive payments alone would set me up for years. The ongoing licensing fees would make me wealthy. But sitting in my apartment at 6:15 a.m., none of that felt as satisfying as what came next. My laptop displayed a cascade of news alerts. TechCrunch. Brightensys Analytics in crisis mode. After IP dispute derails major deal. The Seattle Times. Local tech CEO Brandon Kessler steps down following failed contract negotiations. My personal favorite. From an industry insider blog, how one developer's exit strategy became a masterclass in intellectual property rights. The coffee maker gurgled as I scrolled through my messages. 47 LinkedIn notifications, 23 emails from recruiters, 12 text messages from former colleagues, and one that made me pause from Marcus, the security guard. Saw the news, They cleaned out Kessler's office yesterday at 8 p.m. Never seen the board move that fast. Take care, Ms. Monroe. I'd barely finished reading when my phone rang. Margaret Steinberg. Punctual as always. I hope I'm not calling too early, she said, though we both knew she'd calculated the timing perfectly. Not at all. I'm an early riser. Excellent. I'll be direct. Aurelius wants you, not just your system. Julia, we're prepared to offer you the Chief Innovation Officer position, reporting directly to me. Full autonomy over your division. The resources to build something truly revolutionary. That's a generous offer. It's a strategic one. Yesterday's events demonstrated something vital. You don't just create systems. You understand their value. That's rarer than you might think. I considered her words while watching a crow methodically dismantle something on my balcony. What about the Brighton-Sys licensing agreement? Already factored in. We see it as proof of concept. Anyone who can monetize their exit that effectively belongs in upper management. I need time to think. Of course. But Julia, don't think too long. The industry is watching. Your phone won't stop ringing for weeks. But the truly transformative opportunities will move quickly. After we hung up, I made breakfast and tried to process the seismic shift in my life. 3 days ago, I'd been discarded. Today, I was being courted by companies that wouldn't have returned my calls a week ago. At 9:30 a.m., an unexpected email arrived. Julia, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to apologize. I was naive and selfish, and I let them use me to hurt you. They told me I was ready, that you were holding the company back. I see now they just wanted someone cheaper. I couldn't even run the basic diagnostics yesterday. If you ever have time, I'd love to learn from you properly. Haley. I stared at the message for a long time. The easy thing would be to delete it, to let her drown in the consequences of her ambition. But I remembered being 25, eager, convinced that climbing the ladder meant stepping on the fingers of those above you. The system taught us to compete instead of collaborate, to see other women as threats instead of allies. I typed back, Coffee Tuesday, 10 a.m., Pike Place, bring a notebook. Real learning starts with understanding what you don't know. The weekend passed in a blur of negotiations, consultations, and decisions. My lawyer fielded calls from Brighton-Sys. They needed technical support, desperately. Their remaining team couldn't maintain the system without documentation I'd never provided. Every hour of consulting would cost them $5,000. Industry standard for specialized expertise, I'd insisted, echoing Brandon's favorite phrase. By Monday morning, the full scope of the aftermath became clear. An email from Paul in HR marked confidential painted the picture. Julia thought you should know. Board terminated Brandon with cause. Haley voluntarily demoted herself to junior analyst. Development team is demanding equity reviews. 3 major clients threatening to pull contracts without assurance of system stability. New CEO starting Wednesday. She specifically asked for your contact information, Paul. I'd expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. Destroying Brandon hadn't brought back 2 years of 60-hour weeks. It hadn't erased the humiliation of being discarded like faulty hardware. It had simply proven what I'd always suspected, that the corporate world cannibalized itself, and the only protection was owning something they couldn't take. My doorbell rang at 4:20 p.m. A courier held a single envelope, expensive paper with the Aurelius logo embossed in gold. Inside, Margaret's handwriting. Julia. The board unanimously approved our offer. I've included something extra, a written guarantee that your intellectual property remains yours. Regardless of what you create for us, we value brilliance. We protect it. Let's build something that matters. M.S. The contract inside made my breath catch. The salary was double what Brandon had paid. The equity package was substantial, but more importantly, buried in subsection 12, was a commitment to funding an innovation lab under my complete control. I walked to my window, contract in hand, watching the city pulse with ambition and compromise. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably updating his resume, spinning his failure into a learning experience. Haley was cramming textbooks, trying to become what she'd pretended to be. The Brighton-Sys board was learning an expensive lesson about the true cost of talent. At 5:47 p.m., I signed the Aurelius contract. Not because I needed them, the licensing fees had guaranteed that, but because Margaret understood something Brandon never had. The people who build your future aren't overhead to be minimized. They're the foundation everything else stands on. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day, a text from an unknown number. Ms. Monroe, new CEO of Brighton Sis here. I'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement. Whatever Brandon was paying you, I'll triple it. We need you. Please, Sarah Chen. I smiled, remembering Brandon's laughter, his absolute certainty that I was replaceable. The $63 million contract had collapsed within hours of my departure. His career had evaporated overnight. The company he'd built on my backbone was begging for my return at triple the price. But some bridges, once burned, illuminate exactly where you never want to return. I archived the message and poured a glass of wine. Tomorrow, I'd start at Aurelius. Tomorrow, I'd build something new, something protected, something mine. Tonight, though, I raised my glass to every dismissed developer, every discarded analyst, every brilliant mind told they were replaceable by someone who couldn't even understand their work. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's success so complete that those who undervalued you can only watch from the ruins of their own arrogance, finally understanding what they threw away. Brandon had laughed at my warning. I wondered if he'd ever laugh again without remembering the sound of $63 million disappearing into silence. 3 months later, I stood in my corner office at Aurelius, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Elliott Bay in autumn glory. The space was 3 times larger than anything I'd had at Brighton Sis, but what mattered more were the 2 framed documents on my wall, my termination letter and the email that had saved an empire. Ms. Monroe. My assistant knocked gently. The 10 o'clock is here. Send them in. Sarah Chen entered first, the new CEO of Brighton Sis, who'd inherited a kingdom in flames. Behind her, looking appropriately humbled, walked Haley. The consulting arrangement had become a monthly ritual they paid my exorbitant fees. I kept their systems running, and everyone pretended this was a normal business relationship. The Samsung implementation is stalling, Sarah said without preamble. She'd learned not to waste my time with pleasantries. We need additional authentication protocols. That'll require modifying the core architecture. I turned from the window, letting them see the Aurelius logo prominent on my desk nameplate. Fee structure remains the same. $25,000 for the consultation, $75,000 for implementation. Haley flinched. 3 months ago, she'd been ready to run the entire system. Now she took notes like her career depended on it, which, frankly, it did. Approved, Sarah said through gritted teeth. When can you start? I'll send my team next week. The words tasted like aged wine. My team, my terms, my timeline. After they left, I returned to the window. The city sprawled below. All those glass towers full of Brandon Kesslers and Julia Monroes. Predators and prey locked in an endless dance of ambition and betrayal. But I'd changed the music. My phone buzzed, a Google alert for Brandon's name. I'd kept it active out of curiosity more than spite. He'd finally landed something director of sales at a third-tier startup in Portland. The mighty fall fast in tech, and they rarely climb back to the same heights. At noon, Margaret stopped by, as she did most Fridays. The Nexus project numbers are extraordinary, she said, settling into my guest chair with easy authority. The board's ecstatic. It's good work. No false modesty. I'd learned to own my value. There's something else. She placed a folder on my desk. We're acquiring a company. Due diligence flagged some interesting IP ownership structures. Thought you might find it educational. I opened the folder and nearly laughed. Technova Solutions, another Seattle startup, where the CEO had tried to push out their chief architect without securing proper documentation. The acquisition was stalled. Millions in limbo. All because someone hadn't learned from Brighton Sis's very public mistake. Want to consult on the resolution? Margaret asked with a knowing smile. My rates are worth every penny, I know. She left me with the folder and a reminder about the industry gala next week. I'd be attending as Aurelius's newest executive, not as someone's +1 or anonymous developer in the back. The same people who'd watched security escort me out would shake my hand and pretend they'd always known I was destined for greatness. At 4 p.m., I met Haley for our mentoring session. She'd kept our standing appointment religiously, showing up with genuine questions and hard-won humility. I still don't understand the third-tier encryption, she admitted, pulling up her laptop. The documentation says one thing, but the implementation seems different. That's because the documentation you have is surface level, I explained patiently. Real understanding comes from building, not memorizing. She nodded, taking notes. Then, unexpectedly, do you ever regret how it ended with Brandon and Brighton, sis? I considered the question. I regret that it had to end that way, but not that it ended. Sometimes destruction is the only path to construction. He called me last week, she said quietly. From Portland, asked about the systems, whether I could send him documentation, said he needed it for his new job. And I told him he'd have to contract through your company at standard rates. She met my eyes. He hung up. I smiled. The student was learning. By 6 p.m., I was home. Designer heels traded for comfortable slippers. Takeout sushi replacing corporate dinners. My laptop showed a healthy bank balance that grew larger every month. 30% of Brighton Sis's revenue was a beautiful thing, especially when combined with an Aurelius executive salary. But the money had become secondary to something else: the knowledge that across Seattle, in boardrooms and development studios, my story had become a cautionary tale. HR departments were frantically reviewing employment contracts. CEOs were thinking twice before dismissing their technical talent. Developers were reading their clause 9.7s with new eyes. I'd done more than save myself. I'd shifted the paradigm, even if just a little. My phone lit up with a notification from LinkedIn. Another connection request from Brandon. The 5th this month, I blocked him again. A ritual as satisfying as morning coffee. He'd laughed at my warning that day, so certain of his power, so sure I'd simply disappear into the ranks of the discarded and forgotten. He'd bet everything on my compliance, my defeat, my silence. Instead, I'd taught him and everyone watching a simple truth. When you build your empire on someone else's brilliance, you better make sure they can't take it with them when they leave. The sunset painted the sound in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere out there, another developer was probably staying late, building someone else's dreams, hoping for recognition that might never come. Maybe they'd hear my story. Maybe they'd check their contracts. Maybe they'd realize their worth before someone tried to steal it. I raised my wine glass to the window, to the city, to every brilliant mind that had ever been told they were replaceable. We never had been. And now, finally, they knew it too. The laughter had stopped. The warning had been heard. And I was just getting started. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening to this right now? Are you in your car during a commute, at home relaxing, or perhaps taking a break at work? Drop a comment below and let me know. I love connecting with listeners from all around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced something similar in your workplace? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments below.